to have all of you here next year, bigger venue. We're so happy that there's so much interest from everyone to be here and be part of our day. We have such great opportunities here in the Wood River Valley to be a model for other communities who are facing the same risks that we're facing, from climate change and economic downturns. We're a tourism and recreation economy, and that means that we're a luxury item for people. And so when the economy gets hit, we get hit harder and come back more slowly. We also are seeing the climate change impacts, and we'll talk about that throughout the day. And having moved home here 5 years ago, I just started to see those risks. But having worked globally on these issues, I saw incredible opportunities for job creation, cost savings, and to really strengthen our economy as well, and improve our already incredible quality of life and make sure it stays that way. So we were very pleased to found the Sun Valley Institute for Resilience, and we thought the first thing we need to do is have a forum and bring in folks to start learning about these issues and identifying ways to work together and learn from people outside our community and bring them in. And I'm so grateful to all of our speakers who came in from all over to be here for us and share their strategies. And so throughout the day, you're going to hear from some incredible people who I've had the pleasure of knowing and learning from over my own career. But first, let me introduce our mayor, Mayor Nina Jonas, Mayor of Ketchum, to welcome us today. Mayor Jonas is a fourth-generation native Wood River Valleyan, and she went to Smith College, and so did I, so we love that. And I just have had the pleasure of having her friendship since high school, and I've been so inspired by her leadership and transparency and accessibility and vision for our community as a partner. So thank you, Nina.
Good morning. And it's great to see everybody here. I was anticipating a much smaller group. So I think this speaks volumes of how much this community cares about the community and what we can do together. It's an honor to have Senator Cory Booker here, and also Idaho Senator Michelle Stennett. I can't see her, but I know she is here somewhere. And I can't express too much gratitude to Aimee Christensen for starting this institute, with help, I know, but she's the fiery force behind it. And there's been so much conversation about having an institute like this in our community, and it really took Aimee's leadership and Aimee's guts to get it going. So I thank you, Aimee. And Aimee and some other members in the community or in the room here, Sharon, are part of the Ketchum Energy Advisory Committee, which is a committee for the city. And they advise the city on energy ideas and how to be resilient, cost-effective. Alan's in the back there. Rick's somewhere. I saw him. There he is. And so we've tied our work together seamlessly, and it's been brilliant. And to have this institute as a forum for doing other things beyond what the city can do and build for the community is exceptional, and is a bigger deal than I think people realize, because the city's hands are so tied within the state. So we'll really be able to move forward under this new forum. So again, thank you. And, there's been a lot of bounce back and resilience. It's sort of a human character. And there's many times we see it in our community with the fires, with the economy, with an individual who gets injured, and the whole community rallies to support those individuals. When we had the fire, the community kept going down to the camp and giving them food and giving them sleeping bags, and to the point where the firefighters had to say, "Leave us alone." But really, and the people here on this gorgeous sunny day after a whole week of rain shows how much we care about our community and how much we really want to build on what we have for each other and the love that we have for each other and the support that we have for each other. So I'm really excited to see how we can move forward under an umbrella organization and under the guidance of all these experts here, and I'm excited to hear what everyone has to say, and really build this and become an example community for other resorts in the Northwest and other communities around the world. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Aimee.
Thank you. Thank you. With a very brief introduction to our keynote speaker, who has been an incredible friend and colleague, and has generously given his time to help us launch this institute. Senator Booker really needs very little introduction, and you can read about him in the documents. But he attended Stanford undergrad. He was a tight end football player. He also was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and he graduated from Yale Law School. He was elected mayor in 2006. I met him about 2 months later, and he was elected senator in 2013. And I think what he's most known for is his willingness to just find the solution, whether that means having to cross the aisle and find the solution by collaborating with people who others might not seem a likely collaboration, whether it's being accessible to his constituents, and that's directly on the street. When I knew him as mayor, he was doing ride-alongs at late Friday nights till early in the morning to really get to know his community and what those crime issues were, to his use of technology. And he has 1.5 million Twitter followers, and he uses technology to great impact, whether it's something in the infrastructure of his city or his state that needs addressing, it's emergency, or it's just feedback on a program. He is active and he responds to them, and he's a real model for all of our political leaders. So thank you, Senator Booker, for joining us.
Good morning.
Senator, so I thought I would start by asking
If you call me senator one more time, you're off the stage.
Cory, I thought I would start by asking you, talk to us, why did you agree to say yes to talk to us about resilience today? And of course, I wanted to have you talk about Newark and that city and really bringing it back. It was going through some troubled times when you got there.
So first of all, I just want to say hello to everybody. It's incredibly energizing for me to see the community come together like this. For this purpose. I just got to give a shout out to the mayor. Having been a mayor, it is the toughest job in all of politics. The buck stops with you, and in the very short time of poking around your town, I've heard so many compliments about her, which speaks volumes for the kind of spirit that you bring to the job, so thank you. Mayor, I had 4,000 employees, but I remember when my corporation counsel comes in and tells me, well, you've got 4,000 employees and you have 3,500 outstanding workman compensation claims that you might have to pay. So it was problems everywhere. You know, my police director comes in and says, your union contracts make no sense. By union contract, you have the detectives in your gang task force working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I don't know what the gangs are like in your town, Mayor, but the gangs in Newark did not work 9 to 5, so the police that were investigating them sort of should have been. So all of these challenges, and then Aimee comes along, and no, this is very serious, Aimee, so blush as much as you have to, but, and it was this consciousness expansion for me to understand that if you walk in with an environmental view of the world, it's not an add-on, it's not something to, an afterthought, but if you put sort of a green lens over a lot of these problems, it could actually create really big win-wins for your city in ways that you might not imagine. And so as soon as we sort of started looking at things through a green lens, I began to say creative things like, you can't have the American dream unless it's a green dream, because there's such an urgency to address issues. And in many ways, we were doing I took judo for all of 6 months as a kid, so don't mess with me. I think I got from a white belt to a yellow belt. But one of the first things you learn is judo is about going with the forces as opposed to against them. And when we started understanding that if we harness the wind as opposed to fight it, we could actually do some pretty extraordinary things for our city.
So tell me a few stories about what did that look like on the ground in Newark to help build that resilience, whether it was the port or other areas in which you were investing in
Well,
this issue.
so despite the big difference between our towns, I look out here at these gorgeous mountain ranges, and I think this reminds me of New Jersey. It's just, I feel so at home as I look around here. So despite the obvious similarities between our communities, you know, any community of people, and this is what I'm just getting energized from this group here, who comes together with the same goals, that really affirm their community, build upon it, wants to see your community successful. That's what we did as a community. We pulled together in these big transition forums that had everybody represented, from single moms struggling to raise their families to professors at Rutgers and NJIT, all discussing what are our community values, What are our clear goals as a community? And how do we manifest them with strategies that we can all get behind? And it was such an empowering thing. And now that I've been mayor for 2 terms in the Senate, I really do believe that we have so much more power as a community and as a country, frankly, than we recognize. There's a wonderful author, Alice Walker, who said the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. And so when we sat down as a community and started looking, well, every city, every neighborhood, every community has assets. What are the assets of what are the strengths that we have? We actually brought in Michael Porter from Harvard, who has something called the Initiative for Competitive Inner Cities, that has this philosophy that if you Archimedes said, give me the right lever and I can change the world. What are the leverage points in Newark, New Jersey, for example? And we started seeing there were things that were just obvious to us. Like, for example, America's 3rd biggest port is in Newark, New Jersey. And you could look at it and say, this is an environmental disaster, or you can look at it with that green lens and say, how do I win-win on a lot of my values? How do I expand opportunity and inclusion, economic growth, but also having a green eye towards things? And so we would see things where we had brownfields all surrounding our port. If you went up above and looked down, you would see the port and then open land that had been made toxic. And then you started talking to the companies themselves, and they were even frustrated that they would bring all these goods and services in, load them on trucks, drive all the way down the New Jersey Turnpike to exit 8A, burning fuel, wasting time, costing more money. And we said, well, this is an obvious strategy. Why aren't we building warehousing and making our area really a transportation logistics hub for the region? And it was a natural thing to do. And before you knew it, we were building acres and acres of warehousing that had very green footprints, because we knew that green was a value. So we were building things with more environmental sustainability and an eye towards our environment. We were creating construction jobs. We were creating warehousing jobs. We were saving those diesel trucks from driving on our highway. And so we just began to find a lot of win-wins. And so crime and violence is a great example. It's a plague in our country. We have a Virginia Tech every single day in America. And a lot of people want to approach crime, again, using that judo perspective. Well, we're going to respond to violence with more armed security in our neighborhoods. Well, that's, as the head of the FBI, Special Agent in Charge, when I asked him, I said, how do we solve this problem? And he goes, we don't solve the problem, Cory. We just deal with the symptoms of the problem. If you really want to solve the problem, you've got to look at building healthier communities that are nurturing families and children, as opposed to creating these very short steps from school, kindergarten, to prison. And when we started thinking about that, well, how do you create healthy, nurturing communities? And doing the research, we found really incredible things, that the environment matters a lot when it comes to criminality. Think, for example, if you are divorced from nature, you all here who enjoy it, but just imagine growing up as a child where you can't plant in the soil because the soil's toxic. You can't breathe the air because the air is toxic. You can't. You're separated from water, air, land in every way. Even what you put in your mouth, you're separated from sources and access to healthy food. And when we started realizing that we have this toxic environment, we realized that no wonder it produces. If your body is in a toxic environment, you're going to produce cancers and all these things that you don't want. And so we just started looking at studies that were even saying really interesting things, like the more trees you plant in your community, the lower crime is, the more access to parks, the more you banish a lot of the ills. So we started leaning in with a very aggressive strategy to double our tree canopy. We decided we were going to make Newark, New Jersey the largest urban farming city in the state. We decided that we were going to create the largest parks expansion our city had in a century. And we started going to those strategies, not even realizing that we were going to create win-win-win-wins. So, for example, the urban gardening, we faced challenges. We couldn't go into the soil, but we got planter boxes and now created acres of urban farming. But we said, wait a minute, we partnered these public-private partnerships like the Trust for Public Land or other sort of environmental groups that we started seeing that we partner with them, and they actually will then need to employ people. Well, why don't we do something that we know dramatically lowers recidivism, which is a massive problem all throughout America, is that we release people from prison prison's not doing much to make them better. In fact, often makes them worse with outrageous things like juvenile solitary confinement. Don't get me on that tangent, but we put them back in the communities, and then we make it even harder for them to get jobs. They can't. You have to check that box that you're a former criminal conviction. You have to. You get all these collateral consequences. You can't get loans from banks, business licenses. We said we want to cut against that. So why don't we put people rapid attachment to work, lowers recidivism, put them to work on a lot of these farms and gardens, and we started creating job opportunities, access to fresh fruits and vegetables for our kids, educational opportunities for schools. The more we did these strategies, the more we saw just a cascade of expanding opportunity for our communities. And so this, for me as a mayor, made me just continue to start looking even more aggressively to make Newark a place that was going to create incredible opportunities. The solar industry is another example. We realized that by embracing solar in our city, that we could actually create training programs, more public-private partnerships for teenage kids that were not going to go to college, but can now learn solar installation, and created jobs for our kids that really boomed. We started seeing that we had energy efficiency problems, not only in government buildings, but our seniors were spending probably about 50% more, arguably, than they should have in energy costs. So we partnered, again, public-private partnerships with unions and others to train people to do environmental retrofits, which then were lowering the cost to our senior citizens of their energy costs. And again, for poor families struggling to afford their mortgages, it created these win-win-win-wins, created jobs, lowered energy, improved our environment. And then, we were talking, and I'm sorry to ramble on like this. I'm a politician and a lawyer who wants to be a Black Baptist minister as well. So anybody who wants to say hallelujah, amen, make me feel at home. And knowing how much campaign finance rules are challenging, we could pass a collection plate as well. But the last point I'll make there is, we found out the challenges of climate change when Hurricane Sandy came and hit our city. And this has been a great thing transitioning as mayor, to see these genius mayors who really begin to understand what the consequences of this are, and begin to think to themselves, how can I, again, use judo to work with the environment as opposed to against it. And you had mentioned to me last night and again this morning, or the night before last and again this morning, one of my favorite mayors in New Jersey is the Hoboken mayor, Dawn Zimmer. And Hoboken is a 1 square mile town that this nation, everything from the first college football game to the first brewery in the United States, it's this historic town. And it got completely flooded during Hurricane Sandy. And one of the reasons it is, something we learned too, is that Newark was a hotter city than everywhere around it because we just had no permeable surfaces, lots and lots of concrete, which made flooding really obvious. And so we started doing things by trying to change the sides of roads from sidewalks and concrete to permeable surfaces, doing a lot of things, green roofs, looking at a lot of ways to do it. And what Dawn saw was when the water came in, it was the same way. It just had no place to go. And so she's decided to create a ring around the city, basically, a green ring around the city. This will be a natural place to absorb water for it to flow, as opposed to flowing back into the city. And her plans, when she brought them down to me in the Senate, were just extraordinary. And I knew as a senator that, and all of us should think this way, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, we should be incredibly frugal with our taxpayer dollars. And trust me, as a guy in politics, I've seen tremendous amounts of waste. But when you know you can invest in something like resiliency, that's going to create greening in an urban area, so it's going to help with things like crime, to giving higher quality of life, that's going to be a better investment than constantly having to invest in recovery, and ultimately save taxpayer money that way. That's a great use of a government dollar to invest in resiliency.
So you
That
hit
was
on
just a
about
tour de
5
force.
topics there
Yes,
that I
yes.
adore. I guess I would start with that last topic of nature. I mean, I always think nature is the best investment. It's amazing how green infrastructure in cities like Newark and Philadelphia and elsewhere, Atlanta, investing in that environmental infrastructure is so much more effective, or with recovery from Katrina, bringing those wetlands back. And so nature just does they're better engineers than we are. So we need to let nature do her job. And we've seen that here in the Wood River Valley with our fires hitting. So the trees are down, and then the rains hit, and then we have massive massive floods. And so there's been a great group working on, it's called 5B Restoration, working on restoring our community with tree planting and other things to prevent those impacts from coming back. But you also hit on solar, and you might have noticed from our logo back here, we have a little sun in the middle of it. And we were so excited about the potential here for job creation, for cost savings, because we do. Half of our residents are on some form of assistance in this valley, and people don't know that. 45% of kids are on reduced or free school lunches, and we have a vast disparity of income, and we believe that energy jobs like you've seen, those green jobs, can be powerful for providing those opportunities for them. And so we're going to be working with our local academic institutions to help provide those trainings for energy efficiency retrofits and solar installations, just like you talked about, and we're learning from communities like yours here. So thank you for mentioning my favorite topic, which is solar energy, as some people may know. And when you were talking about strategy, we have...
And I just want to
Sure.
to continue the solar commercial for just one more second.
Go ahead.
You know, we are... government is often slow to catch up to where society and business often is. One of my big challenges in the Senate is, you know, we still do things like it's the 1930s. I mean, I walked into the Senate floor, and God forbid I try to pull out an iPad, I will be breaking Senate rules, and you'll hear some headline, Booker censured for using technology. And it's you know, why do lobbyists thrive? And I apologize to anybody who's a lobbyist. I know that's a big business here in Sun Valley. But you know, while mayors are releasing data, we believe in as much transparency as possible. Release data out there. The people can then use that data. Like in New York City, for example, Bloomberg was one of the first mayors to really push out all the government data. Which, by the way, government data is the people's data. You should feel like an ownership over that. People then, innovators, can then take that data and do all kind of creative things. Now in New York, you can go in any restaurant and pull up the health inspector's history. You may not want to. It's incredible. But in your government, your federal government, the United States Senate is not a searchable database. The only way you can get information out of there is PDF files, pretty much. And so say you have an issue that you're passionate about. You want to, every time the word solar is mentioned, you want to be alerted on your iPhone. Well, you just can't do that because we're not using XML format. So I say all this as an introduction to the fact that we are so slow moving that when it comes to something like the old energy, which I still believe the exploitation of fossil fuels is something that's making America incredibly competitive. And I'm not one of those people that say we should cease it all. But we've been subsidizing that area so much to ramp it up. But right now, there are twice as many jobs in solar as there are in coal, but we're not in any way investing in that technology the way we should have done in older energies. And so our energy policy is an energy policy of 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and is not a national energy policy focusing on what the future is. I talked to Marco, where's Marco, who's in here? He's, you know, I'm a heterosexual man, but I did feel like kissing you upstairs. I hope you don't mind, because the things you were saying were just so damn sexy. When you were going off on data that I'm going to now integrate into my future talking points and give you no credit for it whatsoever. Good speakers borrow, great speakers steal. But Marco was getting me all excited by just talking about, you know, we're not as a country making the proportionate investments in the technologies that can make us, again, we want to be the globally dominant innovator, exporter of innovation. But our policies are forcing so much innovation outside of our country because our government can't create regulatory and investment strategies that would keep America number one. And this is in every technology. The FAA is strangling innovations on drones, for example. And so in France, they're using drones for mine surveys, they're using drones to fix telephone poles, where we still have people getting injured every year doing that because we can't create a regulatory regime that will support innovation in our country. And the same thing is with solar. And so what I just want to say just to that point is, if we as Americans need to be activated enough to understand that I have two values that I hold dear, which is values of justice or equality and the value of opportunity or growth. And if we want to continue to grow our economy, we've got to start leaning in to new technologies and new innovations.
Absolutely. Just one more point on solar really quick, because
Sure.
I love it. So the President Obama came to join us the day after his State of the Union. He spoke at Boise State University, and it was a very dark, cold day, very dark. And I had to tell him that we were creating solar jobs even in Idaho. And he looked up and he started laughing. He said, "Do you have enough sun?" And I had to wonk out on him and tell him that, yes, we have the same amount of sun as North Florida. We only have 10% less than Texas. It's a huge asset for great job creation. We can help our farmers because it provides a secondary source of income. It doesn't have the risks of the marketplace of agricultural markets. And so it's a nice complement to shore up those job opportunities as well as in our own communities. We're very excited that the mayor and others have been working across jurisdictions, the county, to facilitate solar installations for homes and businesses.
And you
here.
know you're being successful when, and again, I watch legislation across the country, both federal, and I like to see what states are doing. And you know you're being successful when people are beginning to push back. And you see all these laws being tried to push around our country that limit the ability of people to put solar panels on, and fighting this movement. And so that's a great sign that we are really getting in, because solar, what did Gandhi say? First they'll laugh at you, and then they'll fight you, and eventually they're going to join you. And we're in the fight you stage.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we were the laugh at you stage back 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
But now we really are in the fight stage.
We had our solar on our home in the 70s. Barbara Box used to borrow Mom's solar energy books, so we go way back.
Yes.
We were laughed at, definitely. But in Idaho, we're having that battle right now. We're having a little battle over the future of energy in our state, but it's good. We're having conversation. We're doing some fighting, but we're doing some collaborating too, so we're hoping to get through that by bringing people together. And that's my other question was, we have been thinking strategically about our assets. What are our assets and our values as a community? A couple of years ago, we had our economic summit, which we have every October, that's hosted by the Sun Valley Economic Development Organization. And 2 years ago, we talked about quality of place. What is our quality of place? What does that mean to us? And we talked about assets like environment and recreation, business and infrastructure, transportation, because we're so isolated, that's an asset and a value, and social and cultural. And it really helped us begin this conversation about what do we value, what do we prioritize, and what do we invest in. And then the next year, it was all about resilience, because we had seen these threats to our values, to our assets, and our resources. So I would love to ask you for just a couple of more thoughts about how do we take a strategic, integrated look at these issues of building resilience? What have you seen as senator, as mayor, as more examples of how do we set our values as a society, what matters to us? How do we have these conversations? I think we're still learning how to have a group conversation about this and what our values are, and how to empower our leaders to make the right decisions about prioritization. I mean, Nina has a lot on her plate. I know everything from sidewalks to our power risks to water issues. We have a significant water challenge here. So I'm just wanted to ask you for a little bit more about that, some of your insights before we let you go.
Well, I want to go to areas that are controversial, and not to make this easy, because it's not. And I'll go from my federal hat, and then I'll go back to my mayoral hat and experience. And so, again, my two values, if you want to leave here and say, okay, what's Cory Booker about? He's about justice, fairness, equality. Those are the issues. And then the other one is growth, an opportunity. And so what I love to do is, first of all, they're not separate. They're very interrelated, these two principles of mine. And what I started finding out is that when it comes to taxpayer dollars, what a business, if anybody here runs a business, I don't care if it's a restaurant, manufacturing plant, you're usually focused on a few things are core to your success. One is your physical plant. How does the walls of my restaurant, is my roof leaking? The number two is sort of the employees. You need to hire really good people, the quality of your employees. And the other one is finding ways to stay ahead of your competition, whether it's baking the best pie or having the best technology research development. Government sort of should be focused on the same thing, but we're just not as a country anymore. Our physical plant as a nation used to be ranked number one. I call it the trashed inheritance. We inherited from our parents this beautiful house, our country, and we've trashed it. And now we've gone down to the 18th best infrastructure in the country. We used to be number one in developing our employees, our people, number one educating country in the globe. We've now fallen dramatically, even in higher education, which we have the brightest spots of higher education, but they've withered. The UC system used to be the best public college system on the planet. Not anymore. The cost of college, other countries are keeping it low. Germany, 4% of median income to go to college. England, 7%. In America, we're at 50% and growing. You have that final thing, R&D. If you look at percentage of GDP that we're investing in staying ahead of our competition, China, India, Europe, it's gone down dramatically. Now, I go through all of that to say that's growth, but it's also thinking about your taxpayer dollars. Where do I want to invest that I'm going to get a big return, and where am I just wasting dollars? We are a country wasting dollars because we used to have a criminal justice system that was on par with other countries in terms of how many people we incarcerate. Then 1970s, 80s, it's gone up 800%. We now throw people in jail. We're criminalizing our country. 75 to 100 million Americans have arrest records now, almost 1 out of 3, because we just love criminalizing human beings. We have 4% of the globe's population, but 25% of the globe's prison population. This costs us $250 billion a year, when we should be investing in things like I mentioned, infrastructure, college affordability, you name it. What we're investing in, we were building a new prison every 10 days between the mid-1990s to this. So we in America, we spend a lot of government dollars. We love to spend, but we're not spending them in an intelligent way. And so when it comes to these things like resiliency, like creating the infrastructure of tomorrow that's gonna not contribute to our environmental catastrophe that's happening right now, but actually go again with nature and environment, that's what we should be doing, and we're just not doing it. And in fact, by racking up an infrastructure debt right now, $3 trillion of an infrastructure debt we have not paid to keep our roads, bridges, tunnels, aviation infrastructure, you name it, up to par. Because of that infrastructure debt, we're causing more environmental problems. In New Jersey, for example, just the idling on streets because of our clogged roads and bridges is polluting our environment, costing us billions of dollars a year. The average New Jerseyan spends about $1,951, I say about, because of our inadequate infrastructure, idling in traffic, wasting gas, lost productivity that should be spent with families, where we want parents with their kids, frankly, or being productive in creating that value of growth. So I say all these things to say, by very unwise investments of our taxpayer dollars, our common treasury, we've compounded our problems as opposed to creating those win-wins. Now, on a local level, that makes often tough decisions. So I'm a Democrat, but I really don't identify that way. I like to identify as an American. And I went down to Washington not to be the Democratic senator for New Jersey, but I went down to be New Jersey's senator. And so I try every time I can to socialize with Republicans. I go to prayer breakfast, Bible study. I go to the gym, which you couldn't really tell, but I do, just to create those relationships with Republicans so we can have conversations because of our common values as a country: fairness, growth, justice, opportunity. And I'll just give the example of tough decision I made as mayor. Nobody cut government more in New Jersey during the 8 years I was there. I cut my government workforce 25%. But I did at times make a rational decision to increase taxes. And I'll give you the example that we invested in resiliency. We saw that people fly into Newark Airport and they pay a rental car tax. And I thought to myself, that is a great inelastic tax, because New York's airports have such a higher rental car tax, but I've yet to meet an American that makes a decision on which airport to fly in based upon the rental car tax fees. And I said, that's a great tax for me to raise. I won't raise as much as in 2 New York airports, LaGuardia and Kennedy, which are far inferior to Newark, by the way. But I'll raise it incrementally and create resources for my city that I can now, instead of just plowing it into an oversized bureaucracy, which I was trying to trim, I'm going to use those resources for those kind of resiliency investments that are going to create win-win-wins and ultimately more tax revenue, because we'll have the right kind of growth. So I just say that as to this community, you've got to, I had a saying when I was mayor: in God we trust, but everybody else bring me data. And a lot of times in politics, we make decisions off of emotions, reflexive partisanship. We make decisions based upon our conceptions of ideas. But what we really should get down to is, what is our values and our goals, and what tough decisions might we have to make to invest to make those goals happen. And there are going to be American tough decisions that we are going to have to make, because we've created, the first rule of holes is when you find yourself in one, stop digging. Well, we've dug so far down in some of our holes that we have tough decisions to make. And I just encourage this community, as you all recognize your power, you have tremendous power. We exercised it in Newark. We reversed the trends of our city, a city 60 years of declining population. Now we're growing. Jobs, businesses leaving, the biggest economic development boom in our city since the 1950s and 60s. We were able to, in an 8-year period, reverse the trends that were making Newark the place that everybody wanted to avoid. And now we have Panasonic moving their North American headquarters there. Whole Foods, which laughed at me when I first said that they're going to build a Whole Foods in Newark. They say, sorry, we won't. And I said, I see it. And one day you're going to see it too. And then that incredibly progressive company is now moving to Newark. You guys have that power too. And I just have to say, realize your power, find out what your values are, come together, and I know your mayor is doing this already, but design strategies that everybody buys into, and then make the tough decisions to pursue those strategies, and you're going to see incredible results. Resiliency is almost an ineffective word to me because it almost sounds like a defensive posture, but it's not. It's an offensive strategy.
Thank you so much for saying all of that. Completely agree. I'm going to open it up to a couple of questions, but I would just say that as an institute, we have the benefit of having partnerships with Arizona State University and Boise State University already, because what we want to be able to do is really establish that data, that grounded data. Where is our baseline? Where are our biggest risks? How do we judge those risks? What are our priorities? And then what are the opportunities? And how do we judge those opportunities? Is it job creation? Is it improved quality of life? What does that look like? What does that mean to us as a community? So as an institute, we're going to be building that data platform and then also be having that conversation about values. And the Rockefeller Foundation is here with us today, and they have been taking a big focus on resilience, made that a high priority for the foundation, and they have a framework that they use. They have a 100 Resilient Cities initiative, and we've been looking at their framework to help inform us as a community and adapt it to what works for us. And so really trying to bring that broader strategy into our community. What are our biggest risks with data informing that? And then what are our greatest opportunities, and how do we prioritize those based upon our values as a community? What's the most important as a community, as a collective? So thank you for saying that. We're just starting, but that approach is one that we're keen to build here in the area.
Should I give you the mic?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Anyone?
And feel free to go off topic. If my mother has put anybody up to asking why I'm still single, you can ask that if you want. I get that question from her every day.
I just wondered about the role of education. I'd like to hear more about what you're doing related to education, and then how does education fit into all of this?
So it is, to me, the unfinished business of America. I always call it the last sort of civil rights battle for this country. I'm not talking about it in terms of race. I'm just talking about this should be a nation that if you're born disadvantaged, poor, you should have an equal shot at cultivating this country's greatest natural resource, which is not solar or coal. It's the genius of our children. The ideas, artistry, innovation of a human mind is incredible, and we are wasting that potential. 9 out of 100 poor people, you have a 9% chance if you're born poor in America of getting a college education. That's radically different if you're middle class or if you're wealthy, and we haven't budged that. In fact, we've gone backwards while our peers have advanced. Social mobility, the ability to get out of poverty and into the middle class, we used to be the top in the globe. Now our peers are blowing past us. If you want to be born poor on the planet Earth, better to be born poor in Germany or Canada or England than it is to be born poor in the United States. You'll have a better chance of making it. And that is so un-American. We should be the global leader at cultivating that genius. And so one of the pathways is education, but when I say that, I want to be very clear that when I look at the data, some of the things that banish poverty, well, what banishes poverty is 2-family households. That's not a popular thing often for a Democrat to say. What banishes poverty is people not having children early in their lives. What banishes poverty is having access to work and jobs. And so if you want to help families deal with that poverty issue, which is one of the weights. In fact, I was talking to somebody here at the Allen Company conference about child trauma. They talked about 5 different types of trauma. And if you have 2 of those, your chances of making it in America are very difficult. And one trauma is poverty itself. So once you're poor, you have one of two strikes, and if you get another one, it's very difficult. So when you start analyzing the data about this question, and that's why, again, I'm a fierce protector of government dollars, but I know one of the best investments for a government dollar is prenatal care. One of the best investments of a government dollar is nurse-family partnerships. Having a nurse come home to a mother in her last trimester and her first 2 years of life dramatically lowers the amount of government interventions that we're going to need later in that kid's life, saves government money. And so when we have kids coming to school who've had listened to 3 million less words coming from poverty than somebody, you know that anybody who's a grade school teacher or kindergarten teacher in this country knows how difficult it is then to try to catch that child up. And so I just want everybody to understand that we need to do the entire continuum, and we need to have honest conversations. And I know we are America's, we're the best, yada, yada, yada. I believe in that. I really do, and I don't mean to be flip about it, but I do believe we can learn when we look at other countries. The last controversial thing, because I don't want to leave here saying things that make us all feel good, it is unacceptable to me that every other industrial peer of ours values children like we do, but they actually have policy that actually backs up those words. If a politician like me says, I love the kids, my mom would like me to have some, they should back that up in what policy. So when every other country has paid family leave, so if your child is sick, in America you have to make these awful decisions, whether I'll do a shift so I can have money to feed that child, or will I be home for that kid? Afghanistan and Pakistan have paid family leave. But in the United States, America, we don't care enough to invest in our kids and our parents to be there for our children when they need us.
Hello. My daughter just asked me why any would ever get into politics. So my question for you is,
Can you point your daughter out? Let's just embarrass her. Like, that's your
Yeah.
job as a dad,
She's
to
into
embarrass your
business.
child.
My question for you is, why did you get into politics, and how can we encourage the best in our culture to get into politics? How can we raise the bar in political life?
So I'm going to try to be as cogent as possible because I have a lot of thoughts about that. So why I got into politics, look, the best way to make God laugh is to make plans for yourself. I was going to be a nonprofit leader. My hero in America was a guy named Jeffrey Canada, who runs, then it was called the Reedland Center, now it's called the Harlem Children's Zone. I moved into the toughest neighborhood I can find in Newark to run a nonprofit. And quickly, leaders in the city began to say to me, we don't need another nonprofit. We need somebody who's going to lead a political change in the city. And so that's what I ended up getting involved in. We have created, as much as we want to blame Washington, please understand that our government ultimately is a reflection of ourselves. And we've allowed our government to reflect the baser values of our community, materialism, venal sort of narrow fights. We now have created a nation of reflexive partisans. There was I think, I got to find this, it was USA Today, I think, put forth an educational policy and said, this is a Democratic policy idea, and immediately 80% of Republicans were against it, 80% of Democrats for it. They switched it around, same policy idea, but they said it was a Republican policy idea. Oh God, all the Democrats were against it. So we've created this toxic political environment, and we reward that. Why? Because we have a political system which the thin margins on the extreme are the ones who vote and participate, especially a primary system, which I have some problems with. And that leaves the 80% of us are non-participants in the middle. And the last thing I'll say, so these are things that changes, and I can talk to you more in the next year when I'm here, if anybody wants to have this longer conversation, but please understand that the way we've created full-time fundraisers and part-time legislators, so much chasing money goes on in Washington, I think has also eroded our political system and made people more cynical about politics. The last thing I'll say about all that, because I don't want to end on a depressing note, all that said, this country desperately needs people that are willing to get involved in politics, whether it's courageous people to step up as a mayor, where it is often a thankless job, where you put your family and everything on hold a little bit because you're so catering, and it needs people to run for Congress, run for Senate, and get involved, because it makes a difference. And I'll give you one example, again, things people don't necessarily want to hear me say, but as much as we talk about coal and much as we talk about gasoline, the number one cause of environmentally damaging things in our air is the food industry, is what we eat and put in our mouths. And, so you'll never make headlines, but as I was involved in a negotiation called TSCA, which I still have to stop. I've only been there about 1.5 years, asking, okay, what does this acronym mean now? But this is toxic chemical law that very important. Yeah, yes, thank you. She knows all the acronyms.
Only an environmental.
Yeah, and so here I am in Washington, the first vegan ever to serve in the United States Senate, which is why I have no chance of ever becoming president. Yeah, yes, exactly. It's like, what's a vegan? Is that a communist? But just by being at the table in this negotiation, I can say, you know what? We should not be testing chemicals on animals in any fashion that's unnecessary when there's scientifically proven efforts to do it. And I can put that in and save cruelty and suffering for a lot. So by getting involved, being at the table, you can do a lot despite all the challenges and sacrifices that are involved in our current system.
Thank you. I think we have to let you go, and so I apologize for the people who still have questions. Please join me in thanking the senator for joining us.